A wealthy patient feigns a coma, but upon overhearing his nurse's revelation, everything shifts. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint aroma of aged wealth. All was blanketed in white. Ivory drapes, ivory linens, ivory stillness. At the heart of the scene rested a man who had remained still for 10 days. Julian Blackwell, 33, heir to one of the nation's oldest luxury hotel empires, was a man who once commanded boardrooms. Now he lay still, a thin scar on his temple, the sole reminder of the crash that had nearly claimed his life. Thus, the world was convinced. What they were unaware of was this. Julian Blackwell was very much awake. He was putting on an act. Beyond the heavy glass door of his secluded hospital suite, hushed voices interrupted the stillness. "I'm telling you," came Damien's voice, Julian's cousin. Slick-haired, perpetually overdressed, always grinning when he believed no one was observing. "This is our opportunity. The board is agitated. We must take action immediately, or we risk losing it all. Step in." The tone was more chilling, more polished. "Catherine Blackwell, the stepmother of Julian." "Absolutely not, Damien. Come on in. We seize the reins. He is exposed. His assets are at risk. The board won't wait indefinitely, and we shouldn't either." Damien paused. However, the attorney representing Julian's estate remains adamant. Catherine interjected. "That attorney won't be an issue for much longer. He is steadfast indeed, yet solitary. We continue to advance the story. Julian might not regain consciousness, and if we ensure the nurse remains cooperative, this will conclude in a matter of weeks." Within the confines of the room, Julian's heart raced fiercely beneath the stillness of his unmoving form. Indeed, it was a reality. He had a feeling that the crash was no mere accident. A spontaneous journey to the Hamptons concluded with a torn guardrail, an overturned vehicle, and a chilling diagnosis of a non-traumatic coma. However, Julian awoke just 2 days later and opted for silence. Not at this moment. He required some time. He sought the truth behind the betrayal, and now, in part, he had uncovered it. The door slid open, releasing a gentle sigh. Echoes of movement. "Take your time this round." Distinct. Julian was familiar with that rhythm already. Soft. Proceed with caution. Calculated. "Nora." "Greetings, Mr. Blackwell." Her voice carried a gentle clarity. No insincere charm. "It's only me." She glided around the bed with a serene precision, monitoring his vitals, smoothing his blanket, and gently tucking his hair back with an expert touch. Her touch held no pity, only a sense of professionalism intertwined with an elusive quality, something Julian was unable to articulate just yet. He observed her from the narrow gap of his almost closed eyelids, careful not to draw her attention. Her voice filled the room as she read aloud under the soft glow of the night, the manner in which she softly hummed to herself while adjusting his fore. She regarded him as a person, not a hopeless situation, and she never uttered a harsh word. "Unlike Catherine, unlike Damien, your levels appear stable today," Nora remarked softly, jotting something down in the chart. "That's quite favorable." She settled next to him, letting out a gentle sigh. "I'm not sure if you can hear me," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if sharing a secret. "However, I believe you have the ability to do so. Merely an emotion." Julian sensed a warmth building within him. Was she on the verge of expressing something? He listened intently, his heart calm. "I accepted this position due to financial necessity. That isn't an offense. I refrained from asking too many questions because, quite frankly, life doesn't afford me the opportunity. Yet, in this moment, I perceive the world differently. I perceive sounds, and they just don't feel right." She cast a fleeting look at the door. "Your cousin arrived yesterday while you were in a state of slumber, or perhaps just pretending to be. He mentioned to someone on the phone that you wouldn't be waking up anytime soon." And the tone in his voice, it sent a chill down her spine. She swallowed. "I'm not sure what your family dynamic is like, Mr. Blackwell, but it seems they may be wishing for your departure." Julian's fingers danced, barely perceptibly. Nora remained oblivious. "I ought to remain silent," she murmured. I ought to simply accept my paycheck and remain silent. However, I find myself unable to do so. I have endured significant losses already. I chose to become a nurse to make a difference in people's lives. Regardless of your attention, I refuse to be involved in anything that allows someone to disappear simply due to their inconvenience. She rose gradually. I'm going to begin maintaining 2 logs, she whispered, one for them and one that's truthful. Julian sensed a long dormant feeling awaken in his chest, a sensation that had been silent for years. Nora made a final adjustment to the 4, then set a book down on the table next to him. This evening, I will share with you something genuine, something deeply human. She exited in silence, leaving no further remarks behind. The door clicked into place. In the quiet, Julian Blackwell blinked deliberately, a single, measured motion. He would bide his time, but only briefly. The evenings were when the stillness resonated most profoundly. Once the final checks were completed and the cleaning crew departed, Nora would lower the lights and take a seat beside Julian's bed. The only sounds were the gentle beep of machines and the whisper of the wind caressing the tall windows of the private recovery wing. 2 weeks had passed since she accepted the assignment. For 2 weeks, she observed Julian Blackwell, a figure she had previously encountered only in magazines and headlines, now lying motionless like a statue hewn from sorrow. Yet, there was an unsettling feeling, profoundly unsettling. She observed it initially with the medications. During her 2nd week, she glanced at the chart and hesitated. The dosage of the sedative remained the same, even in the absence of any signs of agitation, seizures, or trauma. In reality, it had not undergone any review whatsoever. Next arrived the nutrition logs. The visits from the physicians became increasingly infrequent. The vital signs were recorded, yet they remained unassessed. Not a single visit from the speech therapist who was meant to come every week. And yet, there was a distinct lack of urgency from anyone. No worries, only courteous gestures and distant prompts to adhere to the established guidelines. She had spent ample time in various care facilities, allowing her to recognize the subtle indicators of negligence. Yet, this seemed to be something entirely different. Something purposeful. That evening, she entered with her personal copy of The Little Prince, a cherished book her mother would read during those nights at home that seemed too shadowy. As she conversed with Julian, she turned the pages with a gentle flick of her fingers. "You likely dislike this book?" she murmured, setting it down on the table. "Well, you are an entrepreneur. Functional. Accommodations, agreements, figures. However, I have a fondness for this particular one. The story revolves around an individual who wanders off course and ultimately discovers significance in the most ordinary aspects of life." She grasped his wrist, feeling for his pulse once more. Consistently unwavering, enduring resilience. "You know," she added, her eyes drifting toward the 4 bag. "Yesterday, I inquired with Dr. Langston regarding your sedative dosage. He dismissed me. It was stated as a request from the family. No adjustment, no taper strategy, merely the existing state of affairs." Her voice became edged with irritation. "I chose to be a nurse to assist individuals in their journey to recovery, not to see them remain in a state of stagnation." She rose, made her way to the window, and placed a hand against the glass. "Your true identity remains a mystery to me, Julian. Yet, I'm beginning to think you possess a level of awareness that others are reluctant to acknowledge." Her fingers clenched tightly into a fist. "I am altering your protocol. Not all things. Only a small amount. I understand the approach to take without causing any disturbances. And if anyone inquires, I'll bear the consequences." She glanced over her shoulder at him. "Yet, I cannot remain idle while you fade away in this manner. I've been there and I won't go through it again." She retrieved her notebook and started to jot down notes in a second log, one that she concealed within her locker. A genuine account of medications, reflex reactions, vital signs, and her personal insights. She remained unaware that Julian's eyes shifted subtly beneath their closed lids. At the stroke of midnight, she arrived, cradling a thermos of chamomile tea and a blanket elegantly draped over her shoulders. I ought to head home, she murmured. Yet, sleep eludes me regardless. Once more, she settled beside him, retrieved the book, and turned to the opening chapter. After a brief pause, she gently shut it. Instead, she spoke, not to occupy the silence, but to release the weight of her soul. I wasn't meant to be your nurse, you know, she remarked. I stepped in for another person. Urgent communication. The initial nurse withdrew at the last moment. I didn't inquire about the reason. Her voice trembled. I believed it was destiny. At last, a project that compensated me sufficiently to settle my student loans and regain my license. However, at this moment, she leaned in, resting her elbows on her knees. I caught a glimpse of Catherine's words. Within the corridor, she believed I was taking a pause. She mentioned that we simply have to maintain his sedation until everything is settled. Damien acknowledged it with a casual nod. Nora hesitated. Her hands quivered. I arrived with the intention to assist, but now I fear I was brought on to assist someone in passing away. She gazed at Julian, his expression calm and unchanging. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I felt the need to express it vocally. I refuse to proceed with that. I refuse to engage in anything that is unkind. She rose gradually, her voice scarcely a murmur. I'm not sure what's happening, but I stand by you, regardless of whether you ever awaken. Her fingers brushed against his hand with a delicate grace. You're not by yourself. And then she departed, the door softly clicking shut in her wake. Within the confines of the room, a solitary tear escaped from the edge of Julian's eye. He had company. Perhaps, just perhaps, he might not need to keep up the facade for much longer. Nora remained silent before the doctors, offered no words to the hospital director, and had nothing to say to the Blackwell family. Yet each night she conversed with Julian. She shared fragments of her life with him, recounting tales from her early days as a nursing student, patients who had left a mark on her, shifts that tested her limits, and the small acts of kindness that sustained her spirit. She spoke of her father, a reserved plumber who held the conviction that acts of kindness required no spectators. It simply required a steady approach. Julian paid attention. He was still unable to move or speak, yet he could hear her clearly. It transcended the mere sound of her voice, contained a certain truth. In a world that had instilled in him a deep skepticism towards others, Nora Ellis communicated as if she still believed in the goodness of humanity. Each evening, she came a bit sooner, lingered a bit more. She began conducting subtle neurological stimulation tests, nothing that would draw attention, merely to observe if his body could react. A delicate touch on his palm, a soft pressure against his eyelids, subtle sensory hints. One evening, while she was smoothing his blanket, she lingered beside him, leaning in closer. "Julian," she murmured, her tone wavering. "If you can hear my voice, please respond in some way, no matter how small." Quietude. With a deep sigh, she shook her head in disbelief. Perhaps I'm merely conjuring illusions, yearning to trust in something that doesn't exist. Yet, his index finger stirred, a mere flicker, hardly more than a breath of movement. Yet it was genuine. Nora stood still, her eyes bulging, her breath halted. She leaned in nearer. "Did you really just?" Once more, a measured, intentional curl of his finger appeared. Nora clasped her hands over her mouth. "Oh my goodness!" She rose suddenly, almost toppling the stool behind her. For a brief moment, she found herself captivated by him, her chest heaving rapidly, heart pounding in her chest. Then she chuckled softly, a breathless and astonished sound filled with joy. "You can hear me," she said, stepping back to his side. "Julian, I know you're inside. You've been paying attention this entire time, haven't you?" She fought back tears, extending her hand toward him. "Understood. Oh, we will take our time with this, won't we?" One finger raised signifies agreement, while a lack of response indicates disagreement. Are you able to grasp that? A moment of stillness. Then another flick of his finger. Nora released a tremulous chuckle. "This is absolutely outrageous. It may sound unbelievable, yet I truly do. Your trust is appreciated." After that night, nothing remained the same. Their routine transformed. A fresh cadence emerged, a novel dialect blossoming between them. With a single blink, a subtle twitch, and a firm squeeze. Affirmative, negative, uncertain. She introduced flashcards and began utilizing a fundamental alphabet chart. It unfolded at a leisurely pace, occasionally testing his patience, yet Julian persevered. He was eager to give it a shot. Nora exhibited a remarkable blend of patience, thoughtfulness, and warmth. Her smile lit up with each of his replies. She always allowed him the time he needed. She always regarded his limitations as challenges to be embraced. The bond between them grew stronger. Julian discovered her favorite songs, her preferred coffee flavor, and how she used to observe the ebb and flow of guests at the hotel where her mother worked, envisioning the diverse lives they led. Nora, in return, discovered aspects of him that he had never shared with anyone. Not through words, but through glances, responses, inquiries she would pose, and the way he would twitch once for affirmation, remaining still for negation. This life was never your desire, was it? One night, she inquired, her gaze drifting over his chart as her fingers delicately traced the edge of his sleeve. His finger curled in response. Indeed, your desire was for tranquility, not dominance. Yet another affirmation. She settled next to him. I believe I understand now. I never aspired to become a nurse merely for financial reasons. I aimed to assist, yet at some point, I found myself merely existing rather than truly embracing life. Julian extended his hand gently, attempting to bridge the distance to hers. She accepted it with unwavering resolve. I won't allow them to treat you this way, she declared. I have no interest in their desires. You are returning. We will bring you home. In that instant, after so many years, Julian Blackwell finally felt more than just a name on a contract or a line in a will. He experienced a sense of humanity as someone had chosen to believe in him, even in his silence. And now, with her support, he was prepared to stand up and confront the challenges ahead. In the days that ensued, a subtle yet pressing sense of urgency flowed beneath each moment Nora and Julian experienced together. By day, Nora assumed the role of the dutiful caregiver, meticulously recording routine notes, adjusting the four with practiced precision, and responding with polite nods to Catherine's patronizing comments and Damien's insincere worry. Yet, as darkness fell, she and Julian transformed into something entirely different. Not merely patient and nurse, but allies, collaborators, and resilient souls. She had committed his cues to memory, a slight twitch indicating agreement, a gentle finger tap for disagreement, and a subtle shift in his breath when fear took hold. They were honing their skills remarkably well. One evening, while she gently worked on his left hand to enhance its muscle tone, she leaned in and whispered, I understand your desire to reveal them, but we must gather evidence, solid evidence, and proceed with caution. Julian executed a subtle blink, his latest reply, then flicked his finger slightly. Indeed, Nora retrieved a small gadget from her pocket, a stylish pin-sized camera she had borrowed from her friend in tech support. It may not have been the typical hospital grade, but it was subtle, offered high resolution, and had proven to be a lifesaver for more than one whistleblower previously. She spoke gently, I'll put it in the medication cabinet. That's the spot where Damien and Catherine often converse when they believe no one is listening. I've observed them murmuring, conveying directives to the evening crew. It's about time that others recognized their actions. Julian's eyes sparkled with understanding. Under the cover of darkness, with the assurance that she was alone, Nora quietly entered the med room. With gloved hands and a steady heartbeat, she concealed the camera within the corner of a ceiling panel, just above the fridge where the illicit substances were kept. The motion sensor sprang into action. They sat in anticipation. 2 nights later, the strategy bore fruit. Nora went back to get the camera early that morning, just ahead of the cleaner's arrival. She sat in the break room, headphones on, laptop open, her heart racing as she absorbed the footage. Initially, there was only silence, followed by the sound of footsteps. Damien's voice, she's becoming too entangled, he murmured. That nurse, she's quite clever. Catherine responded with a sense of tranquility, encouraging her to ask questions. As long as she doesn't begin crafting reports, we're good. In addition, our completion is just around the corner. We'll allow for an additional 2 weeks, after which we will proceed with filing the DNR motion. Nora stood still, her breath caught in her throat. Damien mentioned that Julian does not have a living will. Could that potentially raise concerns? We will assert a spoken instruction. I have already communicated with the liaison from the hospital board. They show understanding and compassion. Their desire is to see the chaos eliminated. What about the lawyer? I'm currently in the process of addressing it. He will be excluded from the upcoming meeting. Then arrived the words that sent a shiver down Nora's spine. Catherine stated that the only thing remaining is to maintain his sedation. I want that nurse gone as soon as the paperwork is complete. She has witnessed far too much. Nora remained still, her hands quivering, as the video came to an end. She meticulously saved the file 3 times. First to her USB, then to an encrypted cloud server, and finally on her locked phone. With Julian's assistance, she composed a message to send out. Whom can we rely on? That evening, she inquired while perched beside his bed, her laptop open before her. Julian blinked, his eyelids fluttering in a moment of hesitation. Nora paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. 2 quick blinks. She opened her notebook, turning to a carefully crafted list of names he had diligently assisted her in creating, letter by letter. At the forefront stands Avery Blake, Julian's trusted personal attorney, known for loyalty and discretion, now sidelined by the family following Julian's accident. She mentioned that she would send it to him. We will understand the next steps to take. That evening, she shared the video along with a brief note. Mr. Blake, I am convinced that you are the sole individual who has genuinely supported Julian Blackwell. He is alive, and what is unfolding here is an injustice. This footage demonstrates it clearly. We kindly request your assistance. Nora Ellis. She pressed the send button. Then she grasped Julian's hand and murmured, "They won't prevail." He brushed his fingers against hers, ever so gently. It sufficed. As dawn broke, her phone vibrated softly. A note by Avery Blake. Topic: regarding U R G E J Blackwell. Got it. I'm en route. Please refrain from engaging with others. Ensure his safety. We no longer stand solitary in this journey. Nora glanced at Julian, who lay in slumber, yet the solitude had vanished. A transformation had occurred in the game. Now it was time to take a stand. Julian awoke to the soft light of a Tuesday morning. Initially, it was understated, merely a hint of hazel peeking through his lashes. Nora was in the midst of adjusting his oxygen monitor when she caught sight of the flutter. Her breath hitched. Is that you, Julian? His eyes fluttered. A brief pause, then opened wide. He had opened his eyes to the world around him. After weeks of silence, his eyes finally met hers, and a familiar tension gripped her heart. He was no longer merely reacting with his fingers or breath. He gazed at her, and it felt as though she was truly being noticed for the very first time. Emotion surged within her, and before she could contain it, tears began to form in her eyes. Greetings, she murmured. So you've returned. He attempted to utter a word, yet his throat felt parched, unfamiliar with the act. She tilted her head slightly, bringing a finger to her lips in a thoughtful gesture. Take your time. We'll proceed at a leisurely pace. You are secure. She assisted him in sitting up, supported by cushions. The process was intricate, yet they had meticulously primed themselves for this very moment. Repetitive practice, instinctual responses, gradual recovery. What they hadn't anticipated was the stillness that lingered between them now. Not the hush of dread, but something revered. Later that evening, she returned after her shift, holding a thermos of tea and a small notebook. She suggested we have a conversation. Authentic expressions on this occasion. Julian offered a subtle smile. His voice was gritty and fragmented, yet he managed to utter a single syllable. Tea. she chuckled, handing him the cup. They exchanged brief words over the next hour, with him primarily listening, nodding, and taking moments to rest. Yet his gaze remained fixed on hers. She shared with him the details of the correspondence with Avery Blake, explaining how he was arriving with a legal team and how everything was set in motion. "Once more, you will hold the reins of your estate," she remarked. "And fairness. Just a bit more patience is all that's needed." Julian paused before responding. Then, gently he whispered, "You stayed for me." She nodded, her eyes drifting away from his piercing gaze. A moment lingered. The atmosphere grew darker, enveloping them in shadows. Julian's hand extended gently toward hers. "You rescued me," he murmured. Nora breathed out forcefully, feelings surging ahead like an unstoppable wave. First, she admitted, "I was completely lost. I simply understood that I couldn't be involved in something so harsh. Yet, the longer I lingered here with you, the deeper I delved into my reading, the more our conversations flowed." She cast her gaze downward. "I began to feel invested. It's about the essence of who you are, beyond wealth or reputation. Only you." Julian's gaze became gentle. Nora shook her head, her eyes blinking rapidly. "I'm aware that it lacks professionalism. I understand that this might not be the right thing to express. Yet, I find myself believing that I might be developing feelings for you. It frustrates me that it happens at the most inconvenient moment." Her voice trembled. "You've endured unimaginable struggles. There's no need for someone like me to add complexity to the situation." Julian's hold on her hand tightened just a touch. "You are the sole element that has brought clarity to all of this." Nora's breath hitched. He offered a smile, fragile yet genuine. "You kept everything straightforward. You have restored me." She dabbed at her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan, chuckling gently amidst the tears. "This is absolutely wild," she remarked. "I'm overwhelmed with emotion for my patient." "I'm not your patient," he murmured. "That's a thing of the past." Once more, silence enveloped them. Yet it felt different this time, warm, like a shared breath between two individuals who understood that something had shifted. The wind danced through the trees, while the city buzzed softly beyond the confines of the hospital walls. Within the confines of the room, Julian and Nora sat together, fingers intertwined, existing in a space that was neither romantic nor fully mended. Yet they had shed their fears and embraced the emotions that lingered between them. The conflict raged on, yet in one another, they found a glimmer of hope, a beginning to an unspoken bond that neither was willing to abandon. The sun ascended above the city, embodying a quiet vow. Within the confines of Julian's penthouse suite at the private hospital, Nora assisted him in donning a meticulously tailored gray suit, marking the first genuine attire he had adorned in weeks. He remained frail, his movements sluggish, yet his gaze was more piercing than it had ever been. "Are you certain about this?" Nora inquired while fastening the cuffs of his shirt. Julian gave a subtle nod. "I refuse to conceal myself any longer." Avery Blake made her entrance right at 9 a.m., accompanied by 2 assistants and a rolling briefcase brimming with sealed documents. "The press conference will take place at 10. The boardroom of the hospital is well guarded. Damien and Catherine are set to attend." Julian reclined in his chair, his fingers intertwined before him. "Then let's put on a performance for them." The boardroom was packed. Hospital executives, family members, and a select group of elegantly attired reporters who had been assured an exclusive insight into the future of the Blackwell Empire. Catherine stood at the front of the room, exuding an air of calm assurance in her cream blazer. Damien lingered just behind her, a smirk barely concealed on his face. "Thank you all for being here," she started with grace. "As you are aware, our family has endured an unimaginable struggle with Julian's heartbreaking situation. Today, we aim to delve into the topic of transferring temporary executive control." The grand double doors creaked open, revealing what lay beyond. All attention shifted as Julian Blackwell entered, leaning gently on a cane, adorned in the unmistakable grace of one who had confronted mortality and emerged victorious. Sharp intakes of breath echoed throughout the space. Shutters snapped. Damien's face drained of color. Catherine stood still. Julian remained silent as he made his way to the center of the room. He placed one hand firmly on the table, locking eyes with his stepmother. "I notice you've begun without my presence." "You?" Catherine stammered. "You're awake. This is the way." Julian lifted a hand. "Preserve it." He faced the reporters. "I have been aware for several weeks now. Indeed, I experienced a brief period of being in a coma. Upon waking, I sensed that something was amiss, completely incorrect." Avery advanced, unlatched the briefcase, and retrieved a compact tablet. Julian acknowledged Nora with a nod, her presence at the back of the room having gone unnoticed until this moment. He caught her gaze for an instant, just enough to anchor him. He then pressed play. The air resonated with the sounds of Damien and Catherine's conversation. "We simply have to maintain his sedation. He won't pose an issue for much longer. We will submit the DNR once she is no longer involved." Inhalations of surprise. Whispers. One executive rose to his feet, while another took a seat, covering his mouth with his hand. Damien attempted to articulate his thoughts. That has been misinterpreted." Julian's voice sliced through the air with precision. "You attempted to wipe me out, and you came close to achieving it, if not for the intervention of a single individual." He glanced over at Nora. "I wouldn't find myself in this place." Nora stood still, her heart racing as the eyes of the room fixed upon her. Julian pressed on as the others strategized their forthcoming actions. "She remained. She showed concern. She rescued me." Catherine squinted, her gaze sharp and focused. "You developed feelings for the nurse?" Julian regarded her with a frigid gaze. "No, I selected her just as she decided against being complicit in your wrongdoing." The board members started to whisper quietly amongst one another. Avery stepped in, declaring upcoming charges, formal inquiries, and the restoration of Julian's complete authority. Catherine and Damien exited the room quietly, their legacy disintegrating in their wake. In the quiet space beyond the boardroom's turmoil, Julian rested against the wall, his breath coming in heavy gasps. Nora hurried to his side. "You accomplished it," she murmured. "We accomplished it," he clarified. She paused, glancing about. All eyes were on it. It's common knowledge now. He extended his hand toward hers. "Good," he murmured softly, "for I desire the world to recognize the one who rescued me and the person I wish to stand beside from this moment forward." She gazed at him, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Julian." Yet no further words were necessary, not at this moment, for the truth had emerged, and they were at last liberated to embrace it. Nora chose not to linger for the applause. She quietly slipped away as the boardroom buzzed with whispers and the bright flashes of cameras, making her way through a side door and into the brisk afternoon air. Her hands trembled as she reached for the elevator button. Challenge yourself with complexities that go beyond mere fear. Julian had endured. Victory was his. And yet, why did it seem as though she was the one fleeing? That night, she quietly gathered her belongings in the nurse's locker room. The thermos, the book she once read aloud, and, above all, the small leather-bound notebook that held every whispered thought, every inquiry, every secret she had shared in the quiet moments when she believed Julian was asleep. She understood that her time here had come to an end. She had to leave, not when the whole world had seen him declare her, not when the news was already crafting her into a contemporary Florence Nightingale or a scandalous gold digger. She was not either. She felt a blend of exhaustion and affection, caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty about how to navigate both emotions. As she secured the door, the sound of the elevator chiming echoed behind her. "Nora?" She pivoted. Julian remained in place, not using a cane this time, more stable on his feet, a winter coat draped elegantly over his suit. His gaze was weary yet fixed on hers. She took a deep breath. "It's not wise to wander about by yourself." He stated that he wasn't. She looked down as she said, "I came to find you. I was just about to head out." He moved in closer, a deliberate action that drew my attention. I felt it was essential to arrive at this moment. He delved into his coat and retrieved the notebook. She stood still. He remarked, You abandoned this. You really thought I would just leave it unread. Huh? Nora's cheeks turned a deep shade of crimson. That wasn't intended for anyone, he concluded softly. I understand. He flipped it to a page close to the center. He mentioned that he read this part 5 times. The evening you confessed your feelings for me. A mix of fear and vulnerability in your voice, as you worried I might perceive you in a new light. He shut the notebook and raised his gaze. She fixed her gaze on him, unblinking. He stated that he didn't fall for the nurse. I found myself captivated by the individual who occupied the space next to me during a time when I felt more like a specter than a human being. The individual who decided to have faith in my value, even in moments when she believed no one would ever recognize it. Her eyes filled with tears. Julian. He advanced, his voice steady and assured. Throughout my life, I've experienced affection from others due to my name, my wealth, and my influence. She shook her head, saying you were the first to love me without any of that. I didn't intend to, I understand, he cut in, yet I did. Quietude, gentle, delicate. Then, gently, he inquired, will you return with me? Not to the hospital, not in a professional capacity, just as your true self. She exhaled a breath she hadn't known she was keeping in. And if I agree, I will dedicate my entire life to demonstrating that you chose wisely. Her lips quivered. Very well, she murmured. Then Julian took an action he hadn't taken since before the crash. He smiled, and Nora moved closer, embracing the steady rhythm of their shared journey, crafted moment by moment, phrase by phrase, one heartbeat at a time. For some love stories unfold quietly, without the spectacle of fireworks. Some start quietly and become more pronounced when we ultimately decide to pay attention. After a year, the Blackwell name carried a new significance. The controversy had captured the nation's attention for months. Julian opted for a mostly silent stance following the public revelation, allowing the evidence and the law to convey their own narrative. The footage, the counterfeit papers, and the accounts from witnesses sufficed. Catherine Blackwell, once the elegant and refined matriarch of the empire, now found herself confined within the stark walls of a federal women's prison in upstate New York. The allegations include conspiracy to commit attempted manslaughter, attempted medical fraud, and obstruction of care. Damien, with his lack of caution and heightened arrogance, had proven to be an even simpler target for prosecution. The correspondence with private physicians, the financial maneuvering involving Blackwell Hotel's shares, and the recorded threats he made had determined his destiny. 15 years without the possibility of parole. Their names faded from the hushed conversations of elegant galas and the glimmer of high-end sponsorships. They were mere annotations in a narrative that had shifted towards restoration. Julian had implemented significant transformations. He distanced himself from the everyday management of the Blackwell hotels and redirected his efforts towards a fresh endeavor, the Nora Ellis Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to safeguarding vulnerable patients from medical abuse and providing support to whistleblowers within the healthcare system. Nora initially pushed back against the name, feeling a mix of embarrassment and shyness, yet Julian remained steadfast in his choice. You restored my very existence, he said to her. We now assist in providing others with theirs. Their inaugural pilot program launched in the same hospital that had once cared for Julian. The irony was evident to both, yet the building exuded a new essence, a warmth and brightness that transcended the sunlight pouring through the freshly revealed windows, stemming instead from the creation they had nurtured within. Nora conceived the idea of the desert retreat. It wasn't a luxurious retreat or a lavish getaway, merely a serene dwelling nestled within the canyons of New Mexico, removed from the hustle of the city, distant from heritage, and far away from corporate meetings and treachery. They visited every few months, devoid of cell phones and press, just Nora, Julian, and tranquility. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky ignited in shades of gold, they ascended a slender path behind the house. Nora chuckled while Julian feigned exhaustion. You manage hotels across 5 countries, she playfully remarked, yet you're out of breath after just 15 minutes of walking. He flashed a grin, saying, I nearly met my end. Give me a break. At the pinnacle of the trail lay a vast overlook that extended for miles. Julian delved into the depths of his coat. Nora pivoted at the moment he lowered himself, her breath hitching in her throat. The ring exuded simplicity, a band of rose gold encircling a smooth stone of desert jasper, polished yet uncut, radiating warmth and a natural essence, much like her spirit. I wanted to suggest a serene spot, he mentioned, a place reminiscent of where I rediscovered myself, where I discovered you. Her eyes brimmed with tears. He extended the ring forward. Nora Ellis, you didn't merely rescue me. You restored everything. My life, my identity, my hope. Will you marry me, not the wealthy, not the one who waits, but simply me? She sank to her knees, enveloping him in her embrace. Indeed, she murmured, an unwavering yes. In a serene garden nestled behind the inaugural foundation clinic, they exchanged vows, surrounded by no media, no flashing cameras. Only their family, their chosen family, and those whose lives they had touched. As the ceremony drew to a close, Nora gazed across the crowd and noticed something that caused her heart to skip a beat. A young girl in scrubs, clasping hands with an older woman, sharing a smile amidst tears. Once, that girl reached out to the foundation with a brief yet poignant message. I'm scared to speak, but I think something's wrong in my hospital. Now she was applying to nursing school, inspired by Nora, motivated by Julian, driven by a love that emerged not from perfection, but from unwavering persistence. That evening, as they settled onto a rustic bench, Julian clasped Nora's hand, gazing out over the courtyard where laughter danced beneath lanterns draped from tree to tree, and he rested his head against hers. Will they ever truly move on from what transpired? She beamed with delight. Perhaps. He glanced in her direction. Is that what you desire? No, she replied. Not if it serves as a reminder that kindness endures, that honesty can prevail, and that affection can transcend treachery. Julian pressed his lips to her forehead, and as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, they found solace in each other's presence, not defined by survival or stories told, not as legacies or champions, but simply as two souls, at last complete, at last liberated, at last in their rightful place. At times, the journey to healing unfolds in quiet moments. Love often takes root in trust, and the most courageous act can be to hold faith in another when everyone else has turned their back. Julian and Nora's tale serves as a poignant reminder that neither power, wealth, nor betrayal can eclipse the gentle yet profound strength found in compassion. The essence of truth, regardless of how hidden it may be, has the power to resurface, propelled by the courage of those willing to embrace it. If this narrative touched your heart, ignited your spirit, or brought to mind the strength of forgiveness, kindly give this video a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and above all, subscribe to soul-stirring stories for more deeply moving emotional experiences like this one. In this space, we share narratives that mend, narratives that elevate, and narratives that reconnect us with the essence of our humanity. Thank you for tuning in, and keep in mind, even in silence, love has a voice.